difference. We talk about gender equality. The jobs we choose should be equal for both gender. But still, are we also acknowledging the fact that gender has different genders have some significant differences? Maybe if we understand that, we can utilize the available resources in a better manner. So if we look at the brain, the brain structure aspects and related functional aspects, females have a greater volume in prefrontal, orbitofrontal, and superior temporal cortex. So no wonder females are able to, sorry, able to focus on two different tasks. Their attention skill is much better. Multitasking just comes like that for females, but when it comes to male, they focus on a particular thing and they try to excel in that. And females have better impulse control and an organization of their emotions, and they are very good planners, and their taste and auditory sensory process functions very well as compared to their male counterparts. In male, there is greater volume in ventral, temporal, and occipital regions, which enhances the visual processing and visual recognition mapping. So, if you look at most of the drivers are males, so their geographical orientation is very easy for them. So their visual processing skills are easy. So if we can understand this, and this is again, you cannot say 100% this is true, but mostly this is what the research talks about. So earlier days, if you look at, there was a lot of postpartum analysis after the death of individuals. They looked at the brain structure, and in recent days, you know that MRI is being administered on people to analyze the brain functions and differences in the different gender. So knowing that there is significant difference biologically, in the brain structure itself, obviously the functional aspect will also have a lot of differences between the genders. So there is one major concept which looked at, and it's a very interesting concept of theory of mind. For the last 30 years, a lot of research which has been done in the concept of theory of mind. So the socio-cognitive developmental, it is a very significant socio-cognitive developmental milestone. So how you look at the physical milestones, speech milestones. So similarly, this is socio-cognitive development in children. So what is theory of mind? Basically, how we understand people's behavior. Okay, so and we should also understand that people's behavior may not be directly influenced by the reality, but it is influenced by their own beliefs and how they perceive the reality to be. So the reality can be different, but how I see that makes me understand the particular concept or a situation in different manner. So that is what is theory of mind. And understanding that mental states of others can be different from the reality and from our own mental state. So I may look at that. So if you would have come across a particular image which talks about perception, empathy. So I look at from this way side. I look at a particular number 6. I look at it as number 6. But the opposite person may look at it as a number 9. So this is a typical example we show in the clinical practice or in public speech, where we try to make people understand how your perspective differs. So it need not be the same for different individuals. So a lot of experiments have been done in this concept of a false belief problem. So if you look at this, small cartoon which I have put in the slide. So if a box is shown to a child and ask what is there inside the box, the child may say these are chocolates, for example. And when you ask a child to actually open the box, it contains something. Is somebody saying something? Hello? Is somebody saying something? Can I go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, and when the child when the child actually opens the box, there can be some biscuits or pencils, and you ask the child, okay, you close it. Now I'm going to show it to your friend. So what will your friend think this particular box has? So the child says, if the child says this is pencil or the biscuit which the child child saw, then the theory of mind concept is not yet developed in the child. Okay, the child knows that this is there inside the box, so the child thinks the friend also knows that. So you understand the concept. So usually by 4 years, 5 years, this theory of mind concepts do develop in children, again based on the exposure we give to the child. And this also to do with your empathetic concern, so your pro-social behavioral aspects, so how you try to understand the world, how to empathize with the other individual. So research show that girls are better than boys, or they also acquire it much earlier than boys. So, and they've done some researches among 8 to 11-year-old girls, where the higher 11-year-old children, where girls exhibited higher level of empathetic concern and pro-social behavior as against boys. So this is again the concept talking about theory of mind and how there is gender differences exist in this. So when you look at the childhood development and the mind development. So female children and adults perceive the future as more uncertain than males is another research evidence which talks about. So primarily maybe because female tend to, as a child and as an adult, we tend to analyze a lot of things, we tend to analyze the consequence a lot, but males focus on they live in here and now approach, so their uncertainty about the future or worrying about the future is much lesser. And female children are being neglected more than male children in terms of their physical need, educational need, emotional needs, and that obviously puts them into a higher risk category. So this is, though we all talk about people getting educated, people getting awareness, but still this is the existing reality that we have to understand. And when it comes to adolescents and their mental health or mind, there are a lot of risk factors related to substance use. So this is the time period where they experience peer pressure, or for them, peers are very important. So when the child is not, confident enough to handle things, or when the child is not equipped enough or educated enough to say no to drugs, the child tend to oblige whatever the peers tell them. So there is always a higher risk during this adolescent period in terms of substance use, getting into violent behavior, as well as becoming the victim of the violence. They tend to maintain a lot of secrets from the parents. They tend to, restrict telling certain things to the parents in order to prevent their own self-image, or in order to prevent further, they think the parents may complicate things in Indian setup. So because of that, they either engage in violence or they become the victim of violence. And sexual risk behaviors are also quite high in this particular age because of their inability to take decisions and analyzing the consequence, as well as not realizing the consequence of the behavior. Here the gender influence comes here because the girls have this particular risk of unwanted pregnancies, and both gender have the risk of sexually transmitted diseases. So again, unwanted pregnancies comes with its own mental health consequence and the psychosocial consequence of it. And we all, in Tamil Nadu, if you look at, there were, instances where these children have been, kept in isolation to prevent the society from coming to know about their early pregnancy or unwanted pregnancy, or they've been murdered by, a group of people. So we all come across these, these social consequences and behaviors associated with these, risky sexual behaviors. And when you look at the occupation and gender, obviously the occupational stressor is more among, male. If you look at traditionally, male take up more riskier jobs like, firefighters and being more in military and army. Of course, now females are also, involved in military activities, but the role the men and women plays, even in military setup, may differ. So that makes them, becoming more stressful in their life. So they end up taking more responsibilities in such riskier jobs. Mental health and gender. This is a very, very important thing we all have to understand. Though the situation, the male and female live in the same environment, but individual differences exist in the way they are treated, the way they perceive the environment and the situation or the stressor, and how they process internally. Male and voice or more they develop more kind of externalizing behavior, we call it. So this is more like showing aggression or engaging in behavioral problems, as against female who tend to internalize their behavior, like developing depression. That's why in the third point, if you look at, they have increased risk for depression, they have increased risk for anxiety. So they internalize, they bottle up all the emotions, they don't show it out, or that's why these kind of internalizing mental health issues develop in females as against males. And we also see that males are more prone to addiction, and we see even in disability, if you look at children with autism, you look at the male percentage is higher than the female percentage. And another very important concept related to mental health and gender is their, abuse. What the individuals undergo abuse. So if you look at people with history of abuse, male tend to have more hypersexuality later in life as against females. And when the abuse was, done by a male, it is being perceived as more serious than an attempt done by a female. And it's a myth that only male be the perpetrator of sexual abuse. Even females do engage in sexual abuse. So both male and female become the victim of sexual abuse. So this understanding is important. But again, if you look at the percentage, females being the victim of sexual abuse is higher than the male counterparts. And when the female is a victim and with the male perpetrator, the aversion towards male sexual partner by the female is much more higher than the other way around. And especially childhood sexual abuse affects the sexual interest. And some people can even become asexual, that is not having any sexual interest towards anybody in their adulthood. Again, their sexual orientation being heterosexual or homosexual, also there will be some changes based on the experiences they have in their sexual experiences they have in their childhood. And boys who are refugees and sexual minorities are more exposed to sexual abuse than boys who are not in this category. And for both gender, for both male and female, emotional abuse, especially in childhood, becomes the biggest predictor for the psychiatric symptoms in the laterhood. That's why we talk a lot about the mental health of the children, how we nourish the children, being attentive, not being neglected of their emotional and physical needs. So this is something where we can work in terms of preventive mode. And again, drug abuse, both men and women engage in drug use and abuse, but the percentage wise, if you look at, males have increased risk for heavy drinking and binge drinking, and they get into the diagnostic category of, alcohol dependence or alcohol abuse when compared to females. And this is applicable even for other drugs. Violence and gender. Yes. Okay. So when you look at
Speed is
violence and
over.
gender,
Speed
it's
over.
a very significant impact, and it can have on the mental health of the individual. So women become victim is more higher than men being the victim. So one few of the reasons for women becoming the victim of violence is gender pay inequality, the norms which does not support gender equality, the traditional norms or social norms, and hostility attitude towards women. So this makes women being more vulnerable, or they face a lot of adversities. Adversities meaning a lot of difficult situations in life when compared to men. So again, a victim of violence, be it domestic violence or violence in workplace, does affect the mental and physical health of the individual, which requires an immediate intervention. And a very important factor related to mental health is help seeking behavior. So if you look at traditionally, males help seeking behavior is very less when compared to females in adulthood and later, because of various reasons, like they think it is weak to seek help. They may think that they are more occupied, they have more responsible jobs, more responsible roles to play than focusing on their own health and mental health. But females, they seek mental health much more easier and other kind of help much more easier than male counterparts. So we do see some good prognosis in females. So I would like to end my talk with these final words of mine, that these are all research evidences which talks about the gender and how it can have an impact in the mind of the individuals, but this cannot be generalized 100%, right? So having said that, we as professionals need to go case to case basis. So every case we encounter should be analyzed in detail and the interventions made should be tailor-made. So thank you so much for the time. And the reason why I had it very short is I wanted to have some kind of a significant discussion with the participants.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the information you shared here. And dear participants, it is open for questions now. You can put your questions in the chat box, or you can ask ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, last slide once more repeat, ma'am.
Yes, sure.
Ma'am, your
Ma'am,
mic
please
is
on
off.
your mic. Ma'am, excuse me. Please unmute your mic.
Yeah. So last slide, what I meant was, see, these whatever concepts I spoke today is mostly the information which is being proved by research evidences. But still, every case differs, so we need to have a case to case analysis as professionals. So every case you come across, you try to understand the impact of whatever situation or whatever incident happened in their mental health and analyze, and then your intervention should be tailor made depending upon their need and their experiences. We cannot see, okay, you may come across a woman with a history of alcohol abuse and currently binging alcohol. We may not think that, okay, women is generally not so prone to, or the risk in getting into addiction is much lesser. So let me not focus much on this particular problem of this female's life. So that kind of generalization cannot happen. So this particular person who's sitting in front of you needs this intervention, so we need to intervene. So that's what I mean by we cannot generalize this 100%, but case to case analysis is very important, and your intervention should be based on that particular individual who is in front of you. So if so, another very important thing in the rehab professional is we all have boundaries. So I, as a clinical psychologist, can work only to particular areas of their health aspects. So as a special educator, they have a different role to play. Occupational therapists have a different role to play. So social workers have a different role to play. So if we all understand our boundaries and refer clients depending upon the need, and help them get better intervention, then I think that is what is more important in today's practice.
Ma'am, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lavanya, for the question.
Very nice session, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And there's another question by Ms. Lakshmi Gupta. Can you explain gender as psychosocial aspects? So yeah, this is again a very interesting question. See, based as a child, every one of us have different experiences since our childhood. So how our parents brought us up. So a girl child may be brought up like parents, like a boy. So they dress up the person in boy attire, the male attire. They have a bob cut or boy cut since childhood, and they've been treated. We call them also, with the how you call a boy. So if such things have been made, and the individual is being told that you're very boyish, so and the person also experience that being a boy, they get more power, or they get more attraction, or they get more recognition like that. So that again influences the way the individual look at their own self. So sex is a biological entity, as I told. So the sexual organ, the hormones within the person. But gender is what I think I am. Do I think I'm a male? Am I comfortable being a female and wearing a female attire, or am I more comfortable in wearing a male attire? So if I'm more comfortable there, do I want to be a male, represent myself as a male or a female? So all these thought process we get because of the way we've been treated or the kind of experiences we have. See, this is very, very important. So that's what this defines who we are in terms of psychosocial aspects. So that's what I meant, gender as a psychosocial component on its own. Sex is more as a biological component. Did I make that point clear, Ms. Lakshmi Gupta?
It
If
means,
not,
yeah, ma'am. Wait a minute, ma'am. It means ki, I feel boys are more powerful than girls. That's why I am wearing their attire to look more powerful, to look more authoritative, like kind of. Is it like this?
not just because of the power aspect of being low or being high. There can be other aspects. So I'm more comfortable wearing, a male attire. I'm more comfortable being a male than female. So it's overall thing. It can be power. It can be, how you feel comfortable, or what do you want to call yourself. So everything matters. It's not just the part. So many women may think that, okay, being a male is better than female. So that alone does not define or does not change your gender.
So does it mean that I want to become a boy. So, but society don't expect these things from a girl. So just by changing my attire and all, I can comfort myself or satisfy myself to feel like a boy. Is it, or it affects our mental status also?
It's both. It's actually both. So, a person who wants to change their gender will not feel comfortable being their biological sex. Okay, so it causes immense distress in them. See, we cannot. It's not any mental health issue at all. So this is what we are made of. So you may be comfortable being a male, you may be comfortable being a female, and you may be comfortable wanting to change your gender also. So that's how we are made. So it's both. What you come across in life. So basically, you should be comfortable being that particular gender. So if not, if you're forced to wear, you may be born as a female and you want to change your gender as male, and if you're forced to wear a female dresses and behave like a female, it causes an immense distress in you. Okay, so that is what we talk about.
That's what I wanted to know, that it causes immense distress among girls when they are wearing boys like dresses and all, because the society don't allow us sometimes, or the family members even don't want us to wear a boyish look like a boy, or wear a boy's dresses and all. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Again, see, in our culture, especially, a woman wearing a male attire is accepted, reasonably than a man wearing a female attire. We do see,
true, very true, very true.
Yeah. So as a fashion, I want to wear a jean and a shirt. is different from
Is
I
different.
want to be a male and I want to wear that. So you
Yeah.
understand?
This is the
That's
society. This is the society's perception for male and female. Female can look good in the boys' attire, but can't we can't imagine a boy in a sari or in a lehenga and all these things.
because we
Yeah,
have not been experiencing that. No, it's not
yeah.
yet,
Even
you
the
know,
society is also not accepting these kind of things.
true, very true, very true. And again, see, again, a caution of word would be don't, judge everybody who wears,
Yes,
every girl who wears a
yes,
male attire.
yes.
Okay.
True, true.
So
Very true.
the fashion is different from wanting to change their gender.
Yeah.
Okay, and acknowledging their mental health and their likes and dislikes is very important. You cannot I attended one of the webinar which gave me immense knowledge and a change of attitude. So there's another question by Ms. Arpita, by the psychological aspects of other gender identities than male and female. Yes, and the resource person himself was it was about LGBT community in general. Lay, lesbian, lesbian, gay, and transgender community. So, when people tell them that, okay, you want to do that, so we accept you like that, itself is a wrong statement. Okay. So, it's not that they want to do that, it's what they are. So, it's not that I want to be a female, I am a female. So, I want to wear a dress like this, I want to have my hairstyle like this. So, a male, it's not because I'm born as a female, but I feel as a female. So, similarly, people who want to, change their gender, we have to acknowledge that's what they are. It's not that we accepting them for their choice. It's not a choice. It's a fact. Okay. So again, this is a separate entity. Understanding the transgenders and the leys and gays and lesbian community, because this is a minority community. The lot of stigma associated with changing your gender orientation, or changing having same gender sexual attraction, because the majority differs, and there's a lot of stigma associated with that. We do see family members physically abusing them or restraining them from doing what they want. So how long can you survive doing certain things which you don't accept yourself? Okay, so I cannot be someone else for a long time, right? But the society, the family forces them to do that, no matter laws being passed, no matter there's a lot of awareness being created, even among medical professionals. So treating a person who's changed their gender orientation or having a different gender preference is being looked at in a different way. So obviously their mental health is affected, and we have limited research on this particular area, the psychological aspects or the mental health aspect of this particular population is, again, we have to acknowledge. So there is social, cultural, difficulties they undergo, economical difficulties they undergo, lot of discrimination and stigma right from their getting education, getting employment. So the people who have had a very good employment, but after they took the step towards changing their orientation, they were forced to quit the job, or because of the kind of pressure they experience in the workplace, they quit the job and then they take up other profession or other work which they do not want to do. Okay, so that's why they've been forced into begging, or they've been forced into commercial sex work sometimes. But again, you cannot generalize this. So there are very good professionals we do see doing wonders in this in our own country. So again, the psychological aspects or psychological difficulties they undergo is significantly higher, and their help-seeking behavior again, is being restricted because of the social stigma. And many professionals agree that they're not being equipped enough to handle this population because we lack training in that area as well as we lack facility in that area.
I
Is
think
that
I think people are confused by because sometimes it is all inhibited by the nature in us, and we are confused because of this society and the stigma that what they want us to be look or do or things, and our actual nature is forcefully we repressed it so that the society we can satisfy the society and all things.
Ma'am, can you please unmute yourself? We couldn't
Yeah,
hear you.
sorry. Yeah. So there's another question by Ms. Lakshmi KJ how to work with transgenders with disability. Again, as I told you, there's very limited research on this particular area, but I don't see a major difference between working with the women, men, and transgender population, because you're going to work based on the needs. Only thing which will require from professionals is we should be willing to work beyond our clinics, so beyond our working space. So in terms of finding or helping them to find a safe place to live, or helping the family to accept them as they are. And when the individual has a lot of the needs related to disability, the family may not acknowledge this particular need, that they want to change their gender. Okay, so if they want to change their orientation, so even sex is looked at the least priority or preference for general public as well as the family members when it comes to disability. So especially when it comes to some kind of cognitive or disability, like intellectual disability, autism. So for these people, their own sexual needs are being ignored by I would say even professionals, family members, as well as the general public. So how can one person do not understand the academic concept, math concept, but understand their sexual needs? You cannot say how a person with intellectual disability experience appetite. How do they get thirst? So similarly, they do have the sexual feelings. So when basic needs is being ignored, you can understand a population who are already been marginalized, a minority group, and having a disability. So if they are already changed their orientation, then due to some accidents or something they encountered these disability, then the approach will be different. And a person with disability wanting to change their gender orientation will have even more difficulty, because everybody looks at their disability as a priority, and they don't acknowledge their need, sexual need, or their need to change their orientation. Yeah. Was that clear? See, I'm just sharing my own experience and my own understanding. If any of you have a better explanation, please unmute yourself and share, or put it in the chat. And the person who has asked the question, if my explanation is not convincing, please do let me know in the chat, or unmute yourself and say, so that I can try giving much more explanation. Okay. And there's another question by Ms. Lakshmi Gupta: how to interact with women on gender issues belonging to different cultures. So can you also specify, Ms. Lakshmi, what gender issues you talk about? So specifically, because that differs from culture to culture. Because you have variety of issues related to gender, like there can be their basic needs not being provided, them encountering violence, then facing abuse in life, then not having employment opportunities. So all those different factors affect both genders differently, and how we counsel them or how we equip them differs. Okay, their own identity, okay, and their own roles. So again, see, we all culturally, socially, there are a few norms which is there, but what this individual wants to do is a different thing. Okay, in India, if you look at a woman wanting to prefer career more than their having a child, or bringing up the child or taking care of the family. If this particular woman has decided not to do that but want to have build up their career, obviously this woman is going to feel a lot of stress, a lot of pressure from the society and their own family. So As professionals, we only get this individual coming to us asking for help. So your duty would be equipping the individual or making them understand this is your choice, this is your right to do. So how to handle the pros and cons, understanding all those things also comes into process when we try to explain them the rules of their gender, whatever is expected. So majority of the people may choose to do certain things, but you choose not to do that, and it's completely acceptable. But if it is not harming self or the family, it's okay to do that, and you can also equip the individual to talk to their family members or significant others and how to get their approval. And their own identity, I don't think we need to talk about creating an identity in them, but if they are disturbed, and when you have an opportunity to talk to people to create an awareness about this gender orientation or gender preferences, you can talk about the change, the process where people want to change because they are what they are. Okay, so in that process, maybe you can talk about, if you are not comfortable with your own gender, your sex and gender doesn't match, then it's important you seek a professional help, get some clarity on that, because some people would have already taken the decision. For some people, they'll be in the dilemma, especially when they move from, this adolescent period to adulthood. If they get exposed to a group of people who are already changing their gender and they, get fascinated by that, but little doubtful about what they want to do, what their family will accept them or not. That is a period where people, there will be approach situation in both. So they also want to change their orientation, but at the same time, they also don't know whether they should be doing it as the right decision or not. And some people impulsively, they announce to the world that I'm going to change my gender. Okay, they put it in the Facebook now with the technology. They put it in their, family and friends WhatsApp group, and and after a point they realize, okay, no, I don't want to do this. Okay, so they've already created a kind of friction there. Okay, so in such people, it's important they wait, they undergo maybe some kind of counseling, and then they do. So I think when it comes to their own identity, we don't have to go talk about this to everybody individually, but when we create awareness as professionals, we should be touching upon this point. And those who needs that kind of support or they're in confusion, then you have to sit and talk to them. What they really want, how they can proceed further, and other things. Am I clear, Ms. Lakshmi Gupta? And there's another question, ma'am. Please explain internalizing and externalizing. Also, ma'am, please tell what could be the coping strategy for parents. This is patients or parents, I'm not sure, to deal with such situations when parents, when their kids tell them about their sexual inclinations to be different parents. Okay, fine. See, about internalizing and externalizing, how you have to understand is there is a stress in the individual, how this individual handles the stress. Okay, coping mechanism comes separately. Here, am I bursting out into an aggression? Am I, breaking things around me? Okay, am I harming myself? Am I harming others? So this is what is to do with internalizing and externalizing. Okay, when the individual shows all the emotions outside, so then that becomes externalizing their thing. So some people, they involve in vandalism, that is breaking the public property, or they involve in some kind of antisocial behavior. So all these things are externalizing problem. Internalizing is I bottle up all the emotions within me. Okay, so I, don't express anything. So I kind of try to develop a sense of guilt in me that causes a lot of disturbance in my emotions. I develop depression, I develop anxiety. So these are all internalizing. That is bottling up your own emotion, and that causes a lot of, psychological issues within you. So when it is externalizing, gambling, aggressive behavior, all these things are externalizing behavior. Okay, you show it outside. And coping strategies, simple coping strategies, if we follow in an everyday basis, then definitely it will take us, to a longer, it really helps us to a longer extent from developing any kind of mental health issues. It can be spending time for your own self. dressing up the way you want to dress up, or especially during the lockdown, we all sit at home. People started feeling depressed because they're not dressing up the way they dress up when they go to workplace. Okay, so even if you're at home, even if I'm doing this webinar only online, right? But still, we need to prepare ourselves for that. So similarly, if you start doing this even for work from home, or even if you're not working, if you may be a homemaker, but still you can spend some time for your own self and reading or engaging in some hobbies. Okay, so cooking for your own self, or going for a walking, playing shuttle or some kind of game. So all these things really, protects us, protect our mental health. So then comes developing in mental health issues and then taking appropriate treatment. So these are all what I'm talking is in terms of positive psychology, or looking things around you in a positive manner, having a garden, doing some kind of a painting or an artwork, dancing, singing. These are all preventive measures from you or me developing any kind of mental health issues. So and some people develop negative coping mechanism. Okay, so there is coping strategies. There are positive as well as negative coping strategies. Positive coping strategy can be you just sitting and crying. Okay, and in depression we cry continuously, so that is a diagnosable thing. For some people, just crying or expressing their emotion through crying makes them calm and relaxed. They can think through the problem. Or coping mechanism can even be in terms of writing your problem. Okay, sit and write, so that you can get a different perspective to the whole issues. Maybe I can give a better solution to your problem. When it comes to my own problem, I'm within the problem, so I will have even more difficulty to handle things. So when I actually put it in the paper, I know how I am, what kind of problems I'm facing, or what kind of difficulties I have, and all such things will be I'll be able to understand that. Okay, so this is something which we all have to do in terms of coping mechanism. Other things can be like, negative coping, engaging in alcohol behavior, or showing your aggression on someone else. People who have work stress, they come home and they show their anger and aggression towards their children or their spouse. So these are all negative coping mechanisms. If you understand whether you're coping or not, if you're coping, how you're coping, whether it is positive or negative. If it is negative, find an alternative. And if it is positive, continue to do that. So even small things like doing a daily breathing exercises or a mindfulness exercises, everything helps us a lot to handle our, coping. And when it comes to, counseling parents with children who want to change their sexual inclinations, of course, it's not that easy job, because they will be completely shattered. They will come to you with a lot of emotional disturbances. So acknowledge that their emotional disturbance is understandable. It's not easy. First step would be acknowledging their own emotions. Take it as a process. So you don't try to convince them or force them to do or accept their children the way they want to change, but give it some time, allow them to ventilate, acknowledge, and then you gradually you can encourage the child or the adolescent. Children usually, that age, it's very difficult. They will not usually, be able to take any decision, even if they want to. But you can counsel the child to wait till they reach adulthood and then they take a final decision. And if you're handling somebody who's already adult, then you should, equip them or prepare them to talk to their parents by themselves than be convincing the parents. So it will be like, as mental health professional, I would talk to the parents separately. I would talk to this individual separately and ease in the process or facilitate the process of their communication. Fine. Than me communicating or me convincing the parent. Is that clear, Ms. Narayan Hora?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you.
But ma'am, what about societal pressure on them? See, the kid has his own problems. बच्चा तो कहता है कि मैंने तो बता दिया, this is it.
No, I don't understand Hindi. I'm sorry. I don't understand Hindi. Please make it in English.
Like the kid is saying that I've done what I can do. I have come out and I've told you I have been brave. So I have to deal with my situation. You deal with yours. Now the parents are left all alone. So they have to face the society. Kid doesn't have to face the society. Their uncles, aunts, parents have to face them. So now the coping strategies comes out to be that you have to be social because otherwise you will get into depression. Now, how can they be social? Because people are coming out to them and asking what has happened to your son, what has happened to your girl. According to the societal pressure, what should they do? Should they withdraw from those people or should they face those people?
See, this is the same situation. If you look at many years back, when people marry against the parents, right? So people who had to marry these so-called love marriage, and people marry to a different caste or religion. So this was the same scenario parents were then. So now we see a lot of people getting into they get married to a different culture, or different religion, or different state, different caste, a different language, different country. Okay, so it's being accepted predominantly. It's not a major thing. Though the still even today the parents feel bad. For at least for a few years, the parents don't go out. The parents don't interact with the society. But I think over a period of time now, this concept of accepting people who want to change their gender orientation has happened only now, right? Even legally also now recently only we've got that thing. But still, yes, still many countries are against it, even if they want to have a different, orientation. So, from the parental perspective, it will be different, but help them to cope with things individually before they go and face the society. Can the participants kindly mute yourself? Because, yeah. So, what we have to do is acknowledge, empathize with them, prepare them to handle their emotions individually, and then to prepare them to face the world, because it's not an easy task to go and talk to a relative with a
Ma'am,
society.
noise is coming, ma'am.
Yeah, that's because some of the participants have unmuted themselves. I'll try to mute from my side. Yes. Yeah. So prepare them individually to handle their emotions than they go and face before they go and face the world. Otherwise, it will be a very hard task for them. Okay. So every individual has their own rights to live the life they want without harming another person, obviously. But in such cases, we have to respect the views of the individual also. So it's important we prepare the parents. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So there's another question by Ms. Lakshmi. Risk factors of gender issues, how effects on nuclear family and joint family. So it's both. So when it comes to nuclear family, the support they receive may be very less, but the problem they face also will be less. So they'll be having less pressure from the parent. In the joint family, again, you have the pros and cons. So having a joint family, even if your parents are not accepting, maybe your uncle and aunt would accept, or even if your siblings are not accepting, your cousins may accept. But on the other way, you will have a lot of pressure. So it's mixed, I would say. Unless there is research evidence on particular thing, we cannot actually comment about it. So for persons with disability, again, it's holds the same. In nuclear family, the parents have independence to decide on what kind of interventions they want to do for their child, how they can support the child, whether the child wants to take up a career or do a job or change their gender orientation, whatever be it is, the parents have some kind of liberty to take the decision. At the same time, when it comes to handling the person with disability, they get very less support. So either either of them work. In some cases, then they take the help of caretaker, wherein the child or the adult may not get enough attention, or one of the parent work and one of the parent completely take the care of the person with disability. So there is no possibility for respite. So this person does not get any space for themselves. So they get burdened. They get they experience burnout. That can also cause a lot of mental health issues. So you have adequate you have a lot of research which talks about parents, especially in Indian culture, mothers of persons with disability having burnout, having mental health issues, having a lot of personal psychosocial issues they face. And on the other hand, when you look at the joint family, of course, they may get better support. They may be able to change their roles, but at the same time, liberty to take a decision on the child or the adult with disability may not be there for the parents, even for the individual, I would say. Even for the individual who can cognitively, analyze and take a decision, the liberty may not be there. One, initially, in the initial period of diagnosis, seeking treatment itself will be delayed, mostly in the joint family, because they think that it is something which we can cope with. Or many, children with autism, they, parents say that my, in-laws, my parents, they said that even there was delay in the speech in other family members. So we waited till 5 years, we waited till 6 years, we waited till 7 years. So the early the diagnosis, early the treatment, better the prognosis. We all know. But this kind of delay in the treatment we do see, and not having the liberty to take a decision is, on the other hand, the con we could see in joint family. But I would say both nuclear and joint family has its own pros and cons. But how we prepare the parents to utilize whatever resources they have. See, if a parent have a good job in a particular city and the in-laws and other extended family members live elsewhere, asking them to move, leave this job and go to their family just to seek support doesn't make sense, right? So whatever resource they have, how do we equip them is what is more important. Any questions from anybody else? Or did I miss any questions put in the chat box? Because to my knowledge, I have addressed all the questions, I guess. Moderators, did I miss any questions?
Thank you, ma'am.
Is there any other question by anybody else? If there are no questions, can we wind up the session, moderators?
Ma'am, I think there is no more questions from participants end. So shall we wind up the session, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing your experience here. And once again, thank you, ma'am. Dear participants, requesting you all to wait till 11:30 for the next session.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Thank you,
opportunity. I really thank all the participants who asked a very insightful question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.